two of the strongest warlords in northern China during the Three Kingdoms period, Cao Cao and Yuan Shao, are facing off across the Yellow River. Cao Cao, with his 15,000 men, defends Guandu, the last defense before his capital, against the numerically superior Yuan Shao, with 110,000 men. In the Battle of Baima, Yuan Shao sieged the fort of Baima, and Cao Cao successfully broke the siege and slayed the enemy general Yan Liang. But Cao Cao knew he could not hold off Yuan Shao for much longer, and so he drew back his forces to his main camp at Guandu. However, Yuan Shao, wishing to take the initiative, sent 6,000 cavalry under Wen Chou and Liu Bei to pursue the outnumbered Cao Cao. Cao Cao was quickly informed about the coming of Wen Chou and Liu Bei's cavalry, and realized his peril, for the enemy outnumbered him. But Cao Cao's adaptable mindset, along with clever and quick thinking, saved him from total defeat. He instantly had his men dismount and scatter all the valuables they had brought from Baima onto the road, then hid his forces in the dense woods on either side, waiting for the enemy cavalry to come. When Wen Chou's forces arrived, the soldiers did not see Cao Cao's men, but the valuables scattered on the ground convinced them that Cao Cao had fled. Thirsting for riches, they instantly dismounted and began snatching all the valuables in sight, causing disorder in their ranks. A fight actually broke out among the heavy cavalry of Wen Chou's men, as soldiers rowed over the goods. That was when the 600 elite riders of Cao Cao charged down in a surprise ambush against Wen Chou's men, shattering their defense, slaughtering the 6,000 cavalry, and in the following battle slayed Wen Chou. These minor skirmishes before the main battle, though causing little damage to either side, greatly battered the morale of Yuan Shao and his men. Even after these two victories, Cao Cao was still greatly outnumbered, and he decided to withdraw from all the forts along the river, and concentrated his forces in Guandu. There he began constructing defensive fortifications, such as trenches and temporary walls. Meanwhile, Yuan Shao's forces slowly advanced across the Yellow River, and then laid siege at Guandu. It was at this crucial moment that Liu Bei was sent by Yuan Shao to support the rebellions near Cao Cao's capital at Xuchang. This time, however, Cao Cao could not possibly leave himself, and so sent his cousin, Cao Ren, to deal with the rebellions. In the following engagements, Cao Ren shattered the forces of the rebels. After this failure, Yuan Shao completely stopped sending his own men to Cao Cao's lands. However, Cao Cao's position was still a very unfavorable one, as Yuan Shao's massive army moved forward and laid siege to Guandu. But Yuan Shao found out that the defense was hard to pierce, and Cao Cao countered every move of his enemy effectively. When siege towers were built and the soldiers of Yuan Shao shot arrows into Cao Cao's camp, the latter smashed the towers down with trebuchets. When Yuan Shao's men tried to dig tunnels beneath Cao Cao's position, the latter again countered, with digging a long trench behind his fortifications, preventing any secret ambush. Thus the two sides were now bound in stalemate. But as it drew on, Cao Cao began getting worried with the problem of supplies, which were running low. But heeding the advice of his advisor, Xun Yu, he did not retreat and stood strong, for a retreat at this crucial moment would mean total defeat. Cao Cao then heard about Yuan Shao's lightly guarded supplies that were being transported to the front line. He instantly sent riders to raid the army provisions, and in the following engagement burnt many carts full of precious supplies. This raid did not at all improve Cao Cao's position, but it forced Yuan Shao to call for relief supplies from his own lands, These supplies arrived in the 10th month of the battle at Yuan Shao's position. The latter, once again ignoring the wise advice of his advisors, and not even bothering to draw any lesson from his previous loss of supplies, had the new provisions stored in Wuchao and had it lightly guarded. This caused one of Yuan Shao's advisors, Xu, dissatisfied with his commander, to surrender to Cao Cao, and suggested that the latter should raid Wuchao, which was defended by only 10,000 men. Cao Cao, though skeptical about this piece of information, for he could barely believe Yuan Shao could make the same mistake of leaving supplies lightly guarded, had, all the same, no choice left, for his own supplies were nearly completely exhausted. Thus, he led a 5,000-men detachment through the dead of night to attack Wuchao, where he instantly ambushed the 10,000 men that were camped there. It was a desperate battle, but Cao Cao finally drove Yuan Shao's men back. When Yuan Shao heard that Wuchao was under attack, he received a divided opinion from his advisors. One of them suggested instantly sending forces to attack Cao Cao at Wuchao, which could possibly result in the capture of the enemy general, while another suggested attacking Cao Cao's main camp at Guandu, while half of the latter's force was gone. Yuan Shao chose the latter course, despite strong opposition from his general Zhang He, and sent the latter with a good number of men to attack Guandu. However, Zhang He's men found Guandu's defensive strong, and men who defended it determined. Cao Hong, who commanded the city, was a greatly capable general, and he held Guandu with great confidence, even with his outnumbered troops. What was planned to be a quick surprise victory for Zhang He turned into a lengthy and costly battle. Meanwhile, at Wuchao, Cao Cao had steadily gained the upper hand and successfully burned all the supplies stored there. The 10,000 men were shattered, either dead, wounded, or taken as captives. But Cao Cao had little time to bask in joy. He quickly gathered his men and rushed back with all speed towards Guandu. Meanwhile, at Guandu, both sides suffered great casualties, and the news of the defeat and destruction of supplies at Wuchao reached them. While it gave a new energy for the weary men defending Guandu, it made Zhang He and his men's morale plummet greatly. Morning was approaching, and that also meant the return of Cao Cao's cavalry. Zhang He, who had been against attacking Guandu all the time, felt compelled to withdraw. It was at this moment that he received another piece of news that seemed to completely decide for him. One of Yuan Shao's advisors had, using false information, led Yuan Shao to believe that Zhang He had secretly defected to Cao Cao. Zhang He, knowing that if he returned to Yuan Shao, he would probably be executed, surrendered to Cao Cao. This was an unexpected piece of good news for Cao Cao. The morale of Yuan Shao's men, which had been dwindling at the news from Wuchao, was completely shattered by the surrender of Zhang He, and their ranks were scattered. Their supplies were gone, and all their best generals were either killed or had surrendered. None could steady them any more, and so the men of Yuan Shao scattered and fled. Cao Cao took this chance to unleash a full-scale attack against Yuan Shao, and slaughtered Yuan Shao's army, the latter taking casualties in the thousands, and even more of his fleeing men were taken as captives. Yuan Shao himself escaped with 800 riders, with most of his men deserting. He retreated to a camp within his own lines, crushed and terribly diminished. Casualties upon both sides were heavy, with the Cao army suffering about 3,000 dead or wounded, while the Yuan army had no less than 70,000 taken as captives and buried alive, while at least 10,000 more were killed. Cao Cao had done the impossible. He had defeated an army that was nearly 10 times the size of his own, and stood up again from the brink of total defeat, battering the power of Yuan Shao. The Battle of Guandu was a decisive victory for Cao Cao, who, in a single battle, diminished the power and confidence of Yuan Shao, and killed much of his army. The entire scene in the north of China took a sharp turn. Cao Cao, who had been much weaker than Yuan Shao, instead became the stronger warlord after this battle. 2 years later, Yuan Shao, having not made any further major opposition against Cao Cao, died out of shame and anger at the defeat of this battle, and his 3 sons fought each other for the control of their father's land. Over the course of the next few years, Cao Cao defeated the 3 sons one by one with ease, and by 207 CE had taken all of Yuan Shao's land. By then, he was the master of the north of China, but that has just been the beginning of the Three Kingdoms period. Now how did Yuan Shao, who outnumbered Cao Cao nearly 10-1 and possessed an adequate amount of supplies, lose to the latter? The answer is quite simple. Cao Cao was a far greater warlord than Yuan Shao, who could not even hold a candle to Cao Cao's skill in the management of his land, or his wise and open mind. Yuan Shao, over the course of the battle, had countless opportunities to defeat Cao Cao and end the battle with a single engagement, but he did not use these opportunities, taking the advice of unwise advisers instead of the wise suggestions like those of Zhang He. Mistake after mistake Yuan Shao made, and finally met total defeat.